It's just an awful, awful situation for the rule of law here in the United States because our Justice Department is compromised, and I don't know if we can uncompromise it. I mean, can we get it back? I doubt it. I really doubt it. First up is the truly astonishing development of the collapse of the Hunter Biden plea deal in a federal court in Delaware earlier this week. In that case, you may recall, the Biden-Garland Justice Department came up with a sweetheart plea deal with Hunter Biden, and we kind of knew the general outlines of it, and it was outrageous enough. But then it was exposed more fully to the light of day under really basic questioning by the federal judge handling that case, Judge Noriega up in Delaware, and the whole thing collapsed as a corrupt plan and scheme to try to pull a fast one on the judge, the American people, and the rule of law. Now, you may recall that the Biden gang, to protect Joe, came up with a very narrow plea agreement that had Hunter Biden only admit to essentially misdemeanors related to tax filings, and the gun charge was kept out of the criminal side of the equation. The gun charge meaning he filed false information in the federal form, and that would have resulted in really nothing related to his criminal record. And what happened is Judge Noriega looked at the full plea agreement, which evidently included, this plea document, and then there's kind of a side agreement, the Exhibit A or Exhibit 1, and it's the exhibit that the judge noticed had this scheme and deal where, even though evidently there could be more crimes being prosecuted related to Hunter, he would never be prosecuted under the terms of this deal as long as he kept his nose clean, and I mean that literally. And so it was this broad grant of immunity to Hunter, and the judge said, well, hold on a second, what's going on here? Is there, for instance, the possibility of a Foreign Agents Registration Act violation here and prosecution and crime? And the Justice Department had to admit, because they had been telling Congress, oh no, this investigation is still open. Just because we have these narrow charges doesn't mean we're not looking at other things. So they had to tell the judge yes. And of course, that was not their secret deal with Hunter, because Hunter's lawyer said, hold on a second. We thought we were free and clear here. If this is the case, that this plea deal does not resolve all of Hunter's liabilities, as in any investigation that's currently known, we're done, we're out. And the deal collapsed. So it was literally one or two questions from a federal judge, and this deal was so corrupt and obviously wired in an improper way that it collapsed. And so what is going to happen next? I don't know. I do know what should happen next. Judge Garland should resign in disgrace. U.S. Attorney Weiss, who tried to pull a fast one over the court, should resign in disgrace. Every prosecutor involved in this shady operation should be forced out. And there should be a criminal investigation of the criminal investigation of Hunter Biden and presumably Joe Biden, who is also implicated in all of this. On top of that, there needs to be, and it further highlights the urgency for impeachment of Joe Biden. And not that there's always been a good faith basis to impeach Joe Biden, at least an inquiry into Joe Biden's activities. But what's happened here is that it further highlights and confirms in a dramatic fashion that the Justice Department is not trustworthy on anything related to the Biden crime family. So if there's going to be any modicum of justice done in the next year, year and a half, it's going to be through the accountability of the impeachment process, whatever you want to call it, the impeachment inquiry process. Now, Speaker McCarthy is finally taking our lead, or following our lead, Judicial Watch's lead, because as you know, we've been calling, at least I've been calling for at least an impeachment inquiry for a long time now. And even Speaker McCarthy sees, and he's been hesitant and didn't really want to do anything related to impeachment, certainly not Joe Biden, that it's almost impossible to avoid an impeachment inquiry given the level of criminality evident. And the evidence popping up either from the whistleblowers last week we talked about, that FBI 1023 form, which shows that Burisma bribed the Bidens for $10 million, or at least that's what it's alleged, and evidently other investigations by the FBI, to the degree they existed at all, seem to confirm and corroborate what that form showed. And then we have this collapse of the plea deal. Now, this isn't any plea deal. Plea deals collapse here and again. That's true. But this is the son of the President of the United States, the center of an investigation, for instance, involving monies that went, in theory, not in theory, but the evidence shows went to the president's family, documents that show that Joe Biden was a beneficiary and part of the influence peddling operation, the racketeering operation that Hunter and other members of the family were engaged in, using him as the leverage point to get money for the family operation. And here we have the Justice Department caught with their hands in the cookie jar, colluding with the Biden team to try to pull a fast one on the court. And the court, of course, is, she's, my understanding of Judge Noriega, she's not a shrinking violet. She's no nonsense, but she's obviously very professional. And she didn't express the anger that I probably would have if I had seen what was going on in my court. But she made it clear that the plea agreement is going to be given careful examination by her, especially given all this other information out there, which she evidently is aware of, about the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Because if you're in partnership with a foreign firm that's state-owned, it necessarily raises questions about whether you're a foreign agent. And of course, you've got that information related to Burisma that shows that Hunter was hired to essentially get Joe to keep corruption investigators off the back of Burisma. Again, foreign. How many foreign entities must you be in a relationship with before the Foreign Agent Registration Act is triggered? And of course, the Democrats, they had, for the first time, practically speaking, in American history, started enforcing it criminally against Trump world. And now they're protecting not only Hunter Biden, but I raised the question earlier today on Twitter, is, because remember, Joe was working with Hunter, the evidence shows, after he left, well, I would say as a vice president, obviously the evidence shows that, but more directly after he was vice president. And they were both in deep with the Chinese firm. Well, why didn't Joe register as a foreign agent? So, in essentially one or two questions, and the judge didn't find that Hunter Biden is a foreign agent, but given all the weight of the evidence that was before her, and what Hunter was saying about who his partners were and the money arrangements were, the judge essentially said, is what's going on about this foreign agent registration issue? And the Justice Department had to confess that it was still a live question, because to admit otherwise would be an admission of unbelievable corruption. So what we saw here was, in my view, that with the decimation of the Hunter Biden plea deal, evidence of some of the worst corruption in the Justice Department in modern American history. And it's like, well, you got to go back to Nixon's time to see how the Justice Department was corrupted similarly. But of course, that falls into the left-wing, narrative that only Richard Nixon was corrupt, and that's the only corrupt president we're allowed to talk about. When, of course, the Justice Department under Obama was a noxious nest of corruption, the likes of which we really never had seen, with the way it was used to try to jail Trump and harass Trump, how they were trying to jail and harass Obama's political enemies, through IRS tax filings run by Jack Smith, who's now trying to jail Trump. So it's just further indication that the Justice Department can't be trusted at all. Now, that being said, there still needs to be a criminal investigation, and there's no other way to do a criminal investigation of these issues outside the Justice Department, certainly at the federal level. So there needs to be a special counsel. Now, Weiss ain't it. He's not a special counsel. And there's a question about what authorities he had, and whether he and Garland have been misleading and lying to Congress about the nature of his authorities to fully prosecute these cases. But secondly, we need a special counsel to come in and at least begin to mitigate the bias and corruption that we saw on display in Delaware earlier this week. And of course, it's two sides of the same coin, the effort to protect Hunter and Joe, because by keeping this investigation narrow with the Hunter plea deal, they have the benefit of that is keeps Joe out of it. And if they have to broaden it, it implicates Joe. So that's what this is all about, protecting Joe. And the other side, as I said, of the same coin is prosecuting and abusing Trump. We just filed a lawsuit, for instance, against the Department of the Justice Department for the Hunter Biden IRS investigation documents. And this new lawsuit was filed, I guess we filed it about a week, not that long ago, less than a week or so ago. Of course, the Justice Department is withholding documents from us, and we basically wanted documents. I'm going to say basically. I'm going to tell you what documents we wanted. We wanted records and communications, including emails, email chains, email attachments, text messages, calendar invites, calendar meetings, voice recordings, charts, correspondence, briefings, letters, memoranda, reports, notes of the Office of the Attorney General or the Office of the Deputy Attorney General or any person acting on their behalf regarding the Internal Revenue Service investigation of Hunter Biden. And as I say in the release, the evidence shows that Garland's Justice Department obstructed an IRS criminal investigation implicating Joe Biden. And on top of that obstruction, Garland's Justice Department is violating the federal FOIA law to hide this information and cover up this serious scandal. Now, as I talked about last week, we have this 1023 IRS form that showed that there was serious issues that the IRS and certainly the Justice Department should have been pursuing about both Hunter and Joe. And then we had the testimony of the IRS whistleblowers last week that has been uncontroverted. And one of the whistleblowers said the Department of Justice prevented investigators from following evidence that could have led to Joe Biden, divulged sensitive information to Hunter Biden's attorneys, and allowed the clock to run out to prevent charging Hunter Biden with felonies. Excuse me, that's the judiciary characterization of the testimony. President Biden's politically appointed U.S. attorneys for D.C. and the Central District of California denied the U.S. attorney in Delaware's request to bring charges, which at the time put Hunter Biden on the path to a sweetheart plea deal. Additionally, the IRS whistleblower's testimony confirms the Oversight Committee's findings about the Biden's family influence peddling schemes. And as I say, these agents testified, and they highlighted why the rules required a more serious investigation and prosecution than actually occurred. And I'm going to take this off. I have this on because of my tennis elbow, but it's distracting me. In the Criminal Tax Manual, Chapter 10, the testimony reads, found on the Department of Justice website, Tax Division policy states, cases involving individuals who fail to file tax returns or pay a tax but who also commit acts of evasion or obstruction should be charged as felonies to avoid inequitable treatment. In early August 2022, federal prosecutors from the Department of Justice Tax Division drafted a 99-page memorandum. The memorandum recommended approving felony and misdemeanor charges for the 2017, 2018, and 2019 tax years. If the Delaware U.S. Attorney David Weiss followed DOJ policy as he stated in his most recent letter, Hunter Biden should have been charged with a tax felony, not only the tax misdemeanor charges. We need to treat each taxpayer equally under the law. So this is why Judicial Watch is suing here, because we have information that the IRS was constrained in its investigation of Hunter and Joe. They were told there were trails that it could not pursue with Joe Biden's grandchildren, for instance, who were adults, because it looked like they were getting money. Joe Biden himself personally, and of course Hunter Biden, the Justice Department was constantly running interference. So what's the truth here? The Justice Department and the Biden gang pretends there's no there here, and that's why we're suing under FOIA. If there was no there here, why don't they just release the documents? In my experience at Judicial Watch, we we find that when government agencies don't want to give us documents wholesale on a matter like this, it's because there's something they want to hide. What is the Justice Department hiding about its obstruction and interference with the IRS investigation of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden? You see, they tell us repeatedly, right? The IRS is above politics. There's no interference in the way the IRS operates and how it handles tax issues related to American citizens. Well, here we have information that Biden political appointees interfered with the IRS. So this is an IRS scandal in addition to a Justice Department and the FBI and a White House scandal. The IRS has officially been compromised by the Biden administration in a way that, again, should require criminal investigations and impeachment to start. That's why we're suing. And of course, it's one of many lawsuits we have. We've got lawsuits for that 1023 FBI smoking gun document, not only for the document itself, which thankfully Chuck Grassley has largely released, but for documents about the document. What was the back and forth about the document? What was done with it? And of course, we also want records about what the FBI's involvement was in covering up for Hunter Biden. We've got a big lawsuit against the State Department about what it knew and when about Joe and Hunter's shady foreign dealings. And of course, their operations in Ukraine and elsewhere. So, I mean, Judicial Watch is really second to none. And I'm glad Congress has been taking some significant leads here and pursuing significant leads, both, in getting this information out. But as we said earlier, we need accountability in addition to hearings and information. And our Judicial Watch can get the hearing, can get information too, but we can't impeach someone. We can't prosecute someone. So Congress should be using all the tools available to them to both investigate and prosecute through impeachment these issues. And of course, where there's criminal referrals available, they can always make criminal referrals to the Justice Department, which adds added pressure. They can also change the funding structure of Congress and get some funding mechanisms in place to require the appointment of a special counsel. Also, they can defund the abusive, take away the money from folks like Jack Smith who are abusing Donald Trump in obvious political attacks, obvious election interference, obvious violations of prosecutorial misconduct, obvious selective prosecution. I mean, go back to how they treated Hillary versus how they treated Donald Trump. We saw how they treated Hillary up close because we uncovered the Clinton-Hillary emails. I mean, things were so bad over there that the FBI would only move under that corrupt Obama administration only when Judicial Watch moved. If we did something, the FBI followed up and did something too. They were actually using the FOIA documents that we uncovered about the Clinton email scandal to conduct their own investigation because they hadn't even bothered to do much. And of course, Hillary Clinton famously unknowingly deleted emails and lied about it, took classified information and lied about it, and they did nothing to prosecute her, while targeting Trump in an abusive way, even though he had every right to the documents they're pretending he had no right to. It's just an awful, awful situation for the rule of law here in the United States because our Justice Department is compromised, and I don't know if we can uncompromise it. I mean, can we get it back? I doubt it. I really doubt it. I mean, we really need to rethink the Justice Department from top to bottom in terms of funding, personnel, restrictions on their ability to operate against American citizens for political purposes, making sanctions more severe for abuses for political purposes, and of course for political prosecutions or abuses. And then, of course, the Congress right now can defund the positions of those who have been involved in this corruption. I mean, the lists are there. I mean, for instance, there's the federal court judge down in Missouri in the censorship issue. I mean, he listed the people in the Biden administration who were censoring Americans. Well, just defund all their positions. They shouldn't be working anymore. I mean, we have civil rights violations up the wazoo from the Biden White House, there's new information from Jim Jordan this week, further confirming that the White House told Facebook and pressured Facebook to censor American citizens who dared dissent from the Biden administration's views on where COVID came from and the safety and efficacy of vaccines. Outrageous violations of First Amendment rights directly by the Biden White House. We know the names of the people who did it there. Why are their positions being funded? So in the end, it's not just impeachment inquiry, right? And Speaker McCarthy, you know, we shouldn't demand the minimum from our leaders, right? We should demand the maximum, always. And the maximum is defund, impeach, refer for criminal behavior, and eliminate positions, eliminate jobs, and that's kind of part of the defunding of those implicated. That's, I don't know even if that's the max. So we'll see what happens, but I can tell you that Judicial Watch, no matter what Congress does, will continue to advocate for the rule of law, because I really think our republic is tottering here. Don't you agree? I mean, the Justice Department, it might as well be, you know, Moscow on the Potomac in terms of its corrupt targeting and effort to jail its political opponents. And it's not just Trump, it's American citizens who dared to dispute the 2020 elections. We've got this obsessive, over-the-top prosecutions of Americans involved and caught up in the January 6th disturbances. And I'm not talking about someone who knocked the head of a police officer or engaged in outright violence like that. Frankly, I don't trust the Justice Department to fairly prosecute anyone. I want to be clear here. I don't agree with everything that happened on January 6th, but I don't think this Justice Department can be trusted to prosecute a jaywalking offense, let alone a politicized investigation or prosecutions that are necessarily hyper-partisan on the issues related to January 6th. I mean, we can see, you know, the rules don't apply with their prosecutions. So it's an ugly situation, and Judicial Watch continues, despite the effort by the Justice Department and the Biden administration to try to scare us and intimidate Judicial Watch by calling me, demanding documents from Judicial Watch for their sham grand jury investigation and harassment of Donald Trump. They want to scare everyone off from doing the right thing. And I'm not going to be scared off. Judicial Watch isn't going to be scared off, and I presume you won't be scared off from continuing to support our key work. Joe Biden's Justice Department had some outrageous plea deal that would have kept Hunter Biden free and clear from any prosecution for anything in a way that even a judge couldn't sign on to. I think I forgot to mention that you know, I responded initially to it, and I want to play you my initial response here. Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with the latest on the corrupt Hunter Biden plea deal. It looks like a federal judge essentially demolished the deal after she exposed through a few questions that this deal was way outside the norm, and evidently there was a secret deal between Hunter and the Garland Justice Department to give him outrageous and unprecedented immunity and special favoritism from the Justice Department. I tell you, this is an astonishing development that would, if the Justice Department were ethical, result in the immediate resignation of Attorney General Garland and every other official responsible for this corruption. And I tell you, it lends added urgency to the need for an impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden and, yes, Attorney General Garland. And on top of that, we need a special counsel to investigate Biden family corruption now more than ever. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.